This meeting will now come to order. I'm Chairman Jan Tankersley, Chair of Intergovernmental Coordination, and I've asked Representative Rick Williams if he would open us up with a brief prayer.
There we go. May we bow our heads. Thank you, dear Lord, for the opportunity that we have today. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to carry out the people's business. Help us make the right decisions and do things as Thy would have us to. In Thy name we pray. Amen.
Thank you, Representative Williams. Our first order of business today is to approve the committee rules, and we're going to take that up first thing. I believe each member has been provided a copy, and we've got a few members that are still coming in. Please join us. There's no changes to the rule. Okay, I'm going to give you just a couple of minutes to look over these rules. Essentially, they've not changed. There may be just a word or two different here and there, but essentially they're the same rules that we've operated off of for the past, since I've been here, probably 5.5, 6 years. So if you take a few minutes and just look over them, and I'm going to be quiet and let you just briefly read.
At the proper time, I'd like to make a motion.
If everyone has had a moment to review the rules, I would entertain a motion at this time. Do I have? Okay.
Second.
Okay. And all those in favor would indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed would say no. Okay, thank you. We have our rules, and upon further review, if you have other questions or concerns, please feel free to come by my office, and I'd be happy to meet with you. Aside from our committee rules, which are very important for you to review often, and I'm sure when the time comes that you have a piece of local legislation, you're going to take a much closer look at them. In our House rules, this committee primarily deals with House Rules 18 and 50, and so I will, let you read that. But I think one of the questions I've had over the years is, why don't we have more committee meetings? Well, if you refer to House Rule 18.2, which is in your packet, it does say that when the committee staff reports to the chairman that local legislation meets the technical requirements for, okay, you may not have House Rules 18 and 50 in your packet. I'm sorry, that was brought to my attention, but you certainly have the House rules in your desk on the House floor. You may have a copy in your office, I'm not sure. But pay attention to House Rule 18 and 50, and 18 has several components. And the one that I was reading to you is that when the committee staff, which is Blake Doss, reports to me that the local legislation meets the technical requirements for which the staff inspects and has been signed by the requisite local delegation members under Rule 18.1, the legislation shall be favorably reported as a matter of course without the necessity of action by the committee unless otherwise ordered by the chairman or the committee. And if you later then read Rule 50, that's an entirely different thing, and that becomes a general bill, and I think Blake is going to be discussing that further, but it is just what it says, and it defines what a general bill is for local legislation, and that goes through the process just like any other bill. So, but on that one, we will have committee hearings, and we have several throughout each session. So I just wanted to briefly mention that. And now I would call on my policy analyst, Blake Doss, and he's going to run over a few bits of information regarding our process. So without further ado, Blake.
All right, so I'll keep this brief. I know most of y'all have went over this process for a while, and those of you that have not, in your packet there is a PowerPoint that will walk you through the local legislation process, and any more specific questions, I of course will be there to answer them. And we also have Gina Wright in the room to answer any questions about the reapportionment process, and Jeff Lanier in the back. He's our legislative counsel for the committee, and he'll fill in any gaps that I miss, which will be quite a few, I'm sure. Wanted to just go over the basics real quick. Madam Chair mentioned House Rule 50, and there are 7 things that will take a local bill and make them a general bill, and those will be the bills that we would hear in this committee. If a bill is dealing with the political partisanship of an elected office, if it deals with state revenues, general taxation, gambling, alcoholic beverages, water resources, or hazardous wastes, that will come before our committee. In the past, we pretty much only see bills that deal with the political partisanship of an office, typically a judgeship going from Republican or Democrat to nonpartisan. That's typically what we'll see in this committee. Any bills that don't come before the committee will go through the local legislation process, which is essentially a special subcommittee, and Madam Chair Tankersley and then IGC staff, they walk through the bill, make sure the legal advertisement's correct, make sure it's ran the proper newspaper, ran on the right date, and that the bill has the correct amount of signatures per your county or city, or your delegation rules if you had those turned in by the beginning of this week. And we'll check those. That's something the committee does not look at. Madam Chair will sign off. If all the technical requirements are correct, it'll be put on the local consent calendar, and then it'll go straight to the floor. That it doesn't go to rules.
I would like to interject here that, as most of you know that have been here for a long time, the consent calendar is read on the House floor, and just want to remind you that each and every state representative has the privilege of pulling any piece of local legislation off that calendar for debate. I would, however, say that I really recommend, or for myself, I think it's important that we support as much as possible one another's local legislation, because your local elected folks are the ones that are identifying for you what the needs are in your community, and it's something that we like to see you succeed with your local legislation. So if there's anything we can do to help you, please let us know. Thank you, Blake. If you'll continue.
And the last thing I'll add is if you have any questions about the local process or any policy questions about your local bills, what they can look like, I, of course, can help you. My aide, Jessica Berman, who is across the street right now, can help you. We're located in 401 of the Capitol, right across from Madam Chair Tankersley. And then, of course, Jeff Lanier has been doing this for a long time and probably knows more about local legislation than anybody alive. So I'm sure he's appreciating me saying that. Yeah. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Do any of the committee members have any questions they'd like to ask at this time? And it's never too late to bring questions to our office, and you can see either Blake or myself, and we'd be happy to help you in any way that we can. Okay, and you may forget this, by the time crossover day comes around, it's really around the corner. It's just going to come screaming down at us. But you can still introduce local legislation up to the last few days, 5 days. But please don't wait. If you know you've got it, move it forward, and let's don't get into that time crunch. And I would call on, there we go. I think you're.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I've been on this committee for 7 years, so I appreciate your leadership. While I had my hand raised, I think you answered my question. I know we just passed a resolution today. I was wondering, is it still day 35 is the last day to pass local legislation, and what date is that on the calendar? Is it day 35 still?
So it takes 5 days, session days to pass. So as long as it's introduced on that day 35, we can get it through. 3 days in the House, 2 in the Senate. Is that what you're asking, sir?
Oh, I thought it had to pass the House.
No, sir.
By
It can
day
pass
35.
on sine die.
But you don't want to. You don't.
I
wanna make
I
the
don't want to. I don't want to procrastinate.
But we'll keep a close eye on that, and we'll be making announcements
Okay.
as well.
And that
Very good.
is for local legislation. That's not
Okay,
for bills
thank
for
you.
House Rule 50.
Is that another question? Oh, okay. We're going to move on now and call on Gina Wright. She is Executive Director of the Reapportionment Office, and she has some good information to share with us. And at the end of her presentation, you may direct your questions towards me, and she will stand and answer any questions you may have. Thank you for being here, Gina.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Gina Wright. I'm the Director of the Office of Legislative and Congressional Reapportionment. But we also do stuff that goes to your committee as well. So that would be bills that deal with redistricting of local county commissions, school boards, city councils, sometimes if they don't do home rule, and also city school boards. We occasionally will touch an annexation bill if they're using our office to draft that. So we might have something of that nature that will come through our office. And if those maps are done through our office, or at least when we're drafting and helping Legislative Council with our end of the map writing part, we will already have seen it, so we know what the map looks like. What you will see if you see a copy of the bill won't be a map, though. It'll be a report that we create that's attached in the body of the bill, and it's a listing of the precincts and the census blocks that make up those districts as a part of whatever type of bill it is, if it's county commission or a city council or whatever that might be. On your committee rules, you have a rule that number 22, which refers to my office, and that is basically a technical certification process. And what that means is that once the bills come and are assigned to your committee, the local redistricting bills, then Blake or someone that works with him will bring that to our office for me to look at. And what I'm looking at, I want to explain to you what that involves. Basically, the heading on the report that matches the map that we have in our system should be the same heading that's in the body of the bill, word for word. So the first thing I'm looking at is to make sure that the plan name that's supposed to be for the map that's in the bill matches what's in the body of the bill, so we're talking about the same thing. That's how they are connected there. I'm also going to look at things like the dates, making sure that it's the right date for the right year, that the bill is going to go into effect for those new elections on those new members. I'm going to double check on that. I'm going to double check terms if I know the terms of the districts. If I don't, then I don't have any answer for that. But if I do know, I'll look at that. I'm also going to just kind of eyeball the whole thing, make sure that the description of those districts is attached in the bill. Sometimes mistakes happen and it gets left off or whatnot. So we want to catch it here before it goes any further and make sure that everything is in line and as it's supposed to be before that local redistricting bill moves any further through the process. All I do at that point is a certification form that I'll sign off on and say, this meets the certification that, what I've reviewed, and I'll pass that back to Blake. And at that point, if it's got the necessary signatures or whatever it needs from the delegation, then it'll be put onto the local consent calendar according to whatever Madam Chair and you all determine needs to happen. That's pretty much my office's involvement with that. That's specifically for bills that deal with at the local redistricting level. Those are the ones that will come through this committee. Any questions? I'll be glad to take those.
Any questions from the committee? Is that you?
Yes, it's me. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Gina, I need to know if you would have documentation or maybe maps from a annexation that took place several years back. We received a request to de-annex. And there's some question about whether the actual annexation took place correctly. So I think I may need to start with you in terms of looking at maps from previous years. Is that something that you would have, or I need to speak to someone else?
It depends on whether or not they drafted that type of description of annexation. If it came through the General Assembly in that format, it depends on whether or not they used our office to put it together. If they didn't, then I wouldn't have a way to map a new annexation. If they did it locally using a parcel description, maybe they listed a couple parcels they wanted to annex, we're not going to be able to show that because we don't use parcels for our mapping geography. City boundary lines, once they annex, we don't officially get an update until our next cycle of geography with the Census Bureau. So we're kind of we're not able to manipulate our city limit lines to show those new annexations. So it would depend on, I'd have to do some digging and see if it's something that we've had input in or not.
Okay.
Yeah, but we can definitely talk about that.
Yes, let us please. Thank you.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I don't believe we have any other questions, and Gina is always available and wishes for you to reach out, and she would be willing to help you in any way that she can.
Definitely.
Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And next, we have Jeff Lanier, and he's the Deputy Legislative Counsel and in the Office of Legislative Counsel. And I would love for you to just touch on, he's the first person that you're going to go to with your piece of local legislation, and I believe you were so helpful to me, and you'll tell them all about the importance of the ad and what they may need to mail back to the relevant city or county local government.
Absolutely.
So
thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am Jeff Lanier. I will be assigned to you, your committee for this session as providing your legal counsel during this period of time. However, I'm not the only one, despite all the things that have been said here, that drafts local legislation in our office. We have 12 bill drafters in the Office of Legislative Counsel, and any one of us could draft local legislation. However, due to the nature of some of it, it tends to get routed to one of 4 people. I am one of those 4, along with Paul Higbee, Stuart Morelli, and Lori Brill in our office, all to handle local legislation. And if you can figure out that real quick doing some math, you'll figure out there must be a lot of local legislation. Otherwise, we wouldn't assign 4 of 12 people to that task of just kind of conchoing those things through. But we're here for you. We'll be glad to answer any questions you have with regard to your local legislation. I'm often reminded, and I do when people come in to see me, I remind them of the statement from Tip O'Neill, former Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, that all politics are local. So your job here is a very important one, because I dare say you could vote pretty well however you want to on a state issue or a national issue, but what you mess up at home will come to haunt you and bite you. So it's very important what goes on in this committee and your local legislation. Couple of things. Being on this committee, your colleagues are going to look to you oftentimes for knowledge about the process of local legislation and what they need to do if they're not familiar with it. And so you probably should make yourself generally familiar with it. And there's some things that are not obvious that kind of trip people up. For instance, we were talking just a moment ago about the 5 days to pass a bill through the General Assembly. And that it means 5 days when everything works right. You know, it's got to go. For instance, we'll introduce it in the House on day 1. Day 2, it's second read. It gets reported back with the you got to have your signatures in, so it's reported back, be read and voted upon on day 3, and it has to be immediately transmitted to the Senate on that day, where it can be first read in the Senate that afternoon. Then they'll have a committee report back. And anyway, the process has got to move to get through the 5 days. But the thing that trips up most people about it, they stand around and they think, well, I've got until the 35th legislative day to take care of business. You don't really, if you've not really planned ahead, because the one thing that trips so many people up is that local legislation has to be advertised. And your local paper, some of you are fortunate enough to have a daily paper with very liberal ad guidelines that you can pop it in and get your ad run very quickly and get things done. Others of you have weekly newspapers with some fairly severe lead times that they want for local advertisements. In that case, it can trip you up, because the law is that you must advertise it one time, your notice of intent to introduce local legislation, one time in the legal organ, and you cannot then introduce the actual bill until Monday of the week following the week it appears in the paper. So if you were to come in with a local bill in 1 week after the ad deadline and couldn't get it into the next week, and we're going to be out of session the next, you may have a hard time getting it there. So the lead time for the advertisement is critical, and I would encourage y'all to make sure your colleagues are aware of that and don't sit around. We can run an ad when we have never even drafted a bill. If you'll just tell us what the idea of what the bill is, we can get you an ad so you can run it. In fact, there used to be, and I've not seen it recently, but there used to be some members who would come in, and for every jurisdiction that they represented, they would put in an ad that says, notice of intent to introduce a bill to amend the charter of such and such city and for other purposes. And they would be covered in case anybody wanted something at the last second. I haven't seen many people doing that of late, but that used to be a standard practice that went through. But anyway, that's your ad problem. And with ads, what we're looking for, and you notice how general that one was, the rule is the more general, the easier it is, because once you get into specifics in your ad, you're locked into that, because that's what you've told the people that you're going to introduce a bill on, and you can't change it. So we try not to get into heavy specifics. We try to stay in generalities in case something were to come up and would need to be changed in that. Another little aspect I would want to point out to you, we mentioned in passing, that there are certain local bills, such as the ones dealing with partisan offices, ones dealing with the creation of new cities and so forth, that the General Assembly, at least the House, treats as if they were general bills. Don't get confused on that point, because I've had that discussion with a lot of people. The fact that a local bill is treated as a general bill does not remove all the requirements, because it is still a local bill. If it affects less than the entire state of Georgia, or potentially affects less than the entire state of Georgia, it is a local bill, no matter what you do with it. And people, they kind of raise an eyebrow at me because they say I'm kind of trivializing the process, but it's just so true. I can treat my dog if it were a cat. I can feed it cat food. I can get it a litter box. But at the end of the day, it's a dog. You know, it didn't change its nature just because I treated it one way. So don't get confused on that, because some people come in and say, well, we can't do that. That's a general bill. No, it's a local bill. You're just treating it as if it were a general bill. It still has all the local characteristics. That's why even those city bills creating new cities, they don't get caught by crossover, because it's still a local bill. It's not a general bill. The bills that are affected by crossover are general bills and resolutions having the force and effect of law. Annexation bills, we'll run into those. It drives Gina crazy that our law is this way, but I can have any kind of description. If your colleagues say, I need to annex some property into a city in my district, what I need to take over to Legislative Council? Well, I'll tell you exactly what you need to take over to us. It's something we can put in writing. Do not bring us a map. I can't put a map in a bill. I can't put a map in the Georgia laws. It doesn't have sufficient detail to show you exactly where it is. So we take all sorts of things. We take meets and bounds descriptions, you know, the lovely things about to an iron pin in the ground turning, you know, so many degrees this. We'll take those. We'll take what I call a walking description, starting at the southwest corner of First Street, proceeding in a northwesterly direction to the corner of, I'll take those. I'll even take tax parcels on the thing. No maps. Can't deal with that. Gina doesn't like that because that doesn't match her census geography. Ideally, if you could match her census geography, she would love you. So we'll take those too as far as the description. And with annexations, you know, we have a lot of different ways that you can get property annexed. In fact, there are 4 ways to annex property in the state of Georgia. 3 of them are done at the local level. Only 1 is done at the legislative level. And if you can get your local government to take care of it themselves, it sure will be a lot less headache for you and a lot less pain for everybody else dealing with it. It'll just go a lot smoother that way. And back to the ad thing, one thing. If you do an ad or your colleagues do one, the best thing you can do for our office to make things work a little easier, because we have to provide you an affidavit that you're going to sign that will be attached to the back of your local bill. And one of the things we need is to demonstrate how it was advertised. If you could bring in the entire sheet of paper from where it appeared, where the ad appeared, it has the name of the paper on it, the date the paper was published, it has the ad, and Jennifer Burgess, our person in the office who handles those things, who aids you in making your affidavit, she finds that to be very helpful. That way she can put it all together exactly the way she wants to. Let me remind you, there's several things other than just running the ad you're attesting to in that affidavit. One is that if it affects a governing authority, you have notified them of your intent and give them a copy of the ad to let them know that it's coming along. There's several things there. You might want to read through and make yourself familiar, because you are swearing to that thing and it does have legal effect. Madam Chairman, I think that's about all I can think of off the top of my head. I'd be glad to answer any questions the committee has now or later.
Do we have any questions from the committee?
Madam Chair?
Representative?
Thank you. You may remember I helped with some annexation type bills when I worked for Senator Parent.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm remembering that you had a checklist, like a checklist of what someone needed to do, to all the things they needed, the questions that we should ask if there's local legislation. Was that checklist from your office?
If it was, I'm not familiar with it. I don't think we've generated up one. It could surprise me that maybe one of the lawyers has kind of done it on their own, but it's not one I'm familiar with. It'd probably be, if you can find it, it might be helpful.
Yeah,
we might could
It
institutionalize
was like a
it.
one-page checklist. Yeah, we'll need to look around for that. Yeah.
Representative?
Okay.
If you do, please do. I would like to see it. It might be helpful.
That's being provided by
Oh.
our policy analyst, okay.
Send me a copy, Blake. I think I'd like to see that.
Yes, ma'am.
Well,
We appreciate the wisdom that you've shared with us today. I believe we have another question,
Oh, another
though.
question.
Who's number
Yes, ma'am, Madam
27?
Chair.
I'm sorry.
Who is required? Who pays for the advertisement to run in the paper? Do we do that as a sitting member, or does the local community or whoever it's affecting actually pay for it?
I'm gonna be honest. We just changed our policy on our ads. As a matter of course, when we draft local legislation, we provide an ad that we suggest that you use, along with instructions on how to advertise that particular thing. We have just changed our practice. In the past, we would put your name on it. If you requested local legislation, we would put your name on it, because the practice used to be fairly broad in the General Assembly that whoever requested the legislation would advertise it, sometimes out of your house expense account, sometimes out of your campaign account, sometimes out of your pocket. I guess it depends on how generous you feel that day. But the course of things has kind of changed, and we have noticed over time that many members have gone to a different way of doing things, which is if the local government wants it, they need to advertise it, and they need to pick up the bucks, because, you know, on your own, you wouldn't have necessarily have done that. So we have now taken your name off of it. The ad has no signature line, doesn't say who it's by. The law doesn't say who has to advertise it. It says it just has to be noticed that the legislation will come before you. So I think either way would work well for you, and as long as it gets advertised timely, we're good to go with it.
Thank you. And we have another question, Representative Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lanier, for your information. Just for the sake of our new members in the audience, can you share a little bit more information on the annexation process for legislators? You mentioned it was like 4 ways, 3 locally and 1 through the legislative process. Can you kind of share a little bit more about that process on the legislative side?
Well, the legislative process is not all that complicated. It's you first of all, you're operating on the notion that municipalities are creatures of the General Assembly. They exist because you voted them into being, and likewise to the to the sadness of some municipalities, you can also vote them out of being. And we've had instances of many charters being repealed and so forth through the years. So given that starting point, that means the General Assembly is free to enlarge, restrict, or change the boundaries of a municipality at any point in time. So the legislative process, what we have is we'll just do you a local bill amending the charter of the municipality we're talking about to say that in addition to the area they presently cover, they will either no longer cover this area in an area of a de-annexation, or they will also include this area. And that's where I was talking about we need some sort of description of the area we're including in it. When you're doing that, one of the things that the General Assembly has expressed a very strong opinion about, but I will tell you, because you do have plenary authority to do what you want to, you don't have to do it, but they've expressed a strong opinion about not creating unincorporated islands in the process. So we don't want to annex something that's going to leave a void. Nature abhors a vacuum, and that's we're trying to get away from that. But most anything you give it a map, we'll just put it into the bill form. You advertise it, it's introduced, it's treated like local legislation, and go through the process. Is there something more specific I could address for you on the thing?
Yes, just if I may, Madam Chair, just a quick follow-up question. How should we respond when constituents are in an area that's being considered for annexation by a local government and they don't want to be annexed in that area, but they reach out to their state legislators for some guidance? How do we respond to that?
It's a difficult one because, the cities do have the ability to annex. The General Assembly does have the ability also to add or de-annex territory from a municipality. Certainly if your citizens, you're put in a difficult position when some of your citizens say, we want this or don't want this, and some of your municipal officials say, we do want this very badly. It puts you in a very difficult spot. I don't know what I could tell you as far as balancing those interests. When it comes down to the other three ways that you can do annexation at the local level, one is the 100% method. That's usually not an issue because what that means is the property owner, in all these it kind of takes two to tango. The property owners involved say, we want to be in the city says, we want you. There's usually not a problem there in the 100% method. Then you got the 60-60 method where 60% of the property owners as well as 60% of the voters agree to come in. You're still going to have some people that might be in the 40% that say no, but we do live in a society where generally the majority does control on what happens, and I guess you could say that. And then there's the resolution referendum method where the city expresses a desire to take in a tract of property and passes a resolution to do so, and then they have a referendum in the territory to be annexed and let the people vote on it. And once again, it's a majority vote. I think it's probably you have to point out the realities of the political process and that the majority does rule on it, and it may cause some problems to some people, but it's a benefit to others. I really, that's one of the reasons I am doggone glad I don't do policy. I just do law, and so I tip my hat to you for being able to do policy.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we seem to have one further question, and then we're going to move forward.
Yes.
Okay.
I was wondering about the requirements for a new city. Weren't there some study committees on annexation in new cities like 3 or 4 years ago? Is that right, Madam Chair? Because what I'm thinking.
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sorry, you're off mic right now. But we do have the reports, the result of that study committee, and we can certainly bring up some. We can have future meetings and have speakers come in and talk about some of this other subject matter. Okay. Thank you, and thank you for being with us today.
Look forward to working with the committee.
We look forward to having your wise counsel. I would also like to recognize a few people in the audience that are a tremendous help to all of us as legislators. And we have folks here from GMA, and if you would just stand, Tom Gale, who's direct, I believe. Oh, there he is, okay. And we have Charlotte Davis and Michael McPherson. So be familiar with these folks, and if there's, I think I did get a little report that GMA has a comprehensive guide to annexation online that you can certainly access, and they would be happy to have individual discussions with those of you that may want to look a little deeper into this. Do you have any comments you'd like to make? Tom, please come to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll say just two quick things. One, Blake and Gina and Brian, and of course your counselor, Jeff Lanier, do a terrific job for you all. They work for you all, so ask them questions, some of these detailed questions. We try to be a resource as well. We stay out of local legislation, but we do, as Jeff said, do encourage you all to try to talk with your members of the local governments that you're going to be affecting with some of your local bills. It's that local politics that can't get you in trouble. But use us as a resource. We'll be glad to help in any way. But of course, your staff does a great job.
Thank you, Tom.
Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. We also have with us today those that do a great job talking to us, and they're with the Association of County Commissioners of Georgia. I had the pleasure of being their president in 2010. So I would recognize Todd Edwards and Kathleen Bowen. I would be happy to hear from both or one of you. That was a quick decision, and so Todd's going to join us at the mic.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Again, I'm Todd Edwards. I'm the Deputy Legislative Director for Association County Commissioners of Georgia. I would echo what Tom said with GMA. You all do a great job, Blake, attorneys, Jeff, Madam Chair. Just so you know, we at ACCG, we also do not become involved in local legislation. What we do, just so you're aware, if we go through all bills, as I'm sure GMA does when introduced, and if there is a local legislation impacting a particular county, we notify that county. That is the extent of what we do, is the notification. We prefer, in fact, we insist that they work any bills out between themselves, our county commissioners, and you all, and hopefully y'all get along. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's not our business one way or the other. There's overall issues that we may get involved with as an association, such as the rules or the parameters on whether it be annexation or creation of new cities, but in each individual case, we do not become involved with. Other than that, we look forward to working with you all. If you do have questions, particularly on county governance, we avail ourselves. I'll be happy to give you a card, answer anything, and we also have a lot of talented staff, Kathleen, 2 others at the Capitol, and several attorneys that are willing to assist. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Todd. We appreciate you being here and speaking to us. Oops, cut myself off. Do we have any other comments that anyone would like to make in closing, committee members? If not, I would like to say that we do have a number of new committee members. I'd like to introduce, of course, most of you know Representative Jody Lott. She's our vice chairman this year of the committee, and she's also a governor's floor leader. And we have Dwayne Hill. I believe he had to leave. We had several meetings at the same time today, so I'm amazed and appreciative that all of you could find time in your busy schedules to be here today so that we can establish our rules and get some information to you. And I appreciate so much you being here, and those of you in the audience. If there's no further business, do we need a motion to adjourn this meeting? Thank you.